I don't know about you, but I really get disturbed when I see not just people I know, but especially people who are influencers on social media in the witchcraft community who purchase people. And I'm talking about purebred companion animals. And this video is a bit of a theoretical discussion that is combined with a bit of a call out. So if you want to know more about why a vegan witch would say buying and breeding animals is absolutely unethical and seriously problematic, stick around. Okay, so first off, I'm not naming anybody by name, but I've seen more than once people who I follow on in the witch kind of YouTube community that I really, really respect and really love and just love their content. And then they will start talking about this dog or cat or some other person that they've purchased from a breeder. Oftentimes, by the way, they'll say, oh, I'm adopted. And that's just because they have to create this they have this cognitive dissonance where they know that purpose breeding a person and purchasing them like a commodity is extremely gross. But we live in a society where adopting animals and that's seen as like a social good. And so oftentimes people who actually physically pay money for a dog, for instance, will still call that adoption, even though they actually purchased that dog that was purpose bred for their pleasure and privilege. So I've seen that happen on some of my favorite channels. And in one channel in particular, I don't even remember what it was now because I've unfollowed them immediately because it was just too far for me, where they were even, they had their purebred Doberman on camera and they had the dog's ears cut, which I'm in the UK now and I believe that it's illegal, thankfully, to mutilate your dogs in that way. But in the United States, where anything seems to go, it's totally legal to chop off body parts of your so-called companion animals that you love and adopted. But I've seen that on witchcraft videos where their mutilated dog would be on camera, and it wasn't that they had adopted the dog and the dog just happened to have already been mutilated. The dog was actively in the process from healing from them just mutilating them, like they had the bandages on and things like that. And by the way, I'm always conscious of that because my dog does not have a tail. You know what? She was looking a bit bored a minute ago. Let's bring her on. See? Mishka doesn't have a tail. But that's not because it was lopped off in some horrible mutilation. No. It's because she was born that way. She's born with lots and lots of genetic quirks, if you will. One of them was that she has no tail. And there is a tail. It just kind of didn't finish. It went like that, didn't it? It's a little crook pirate's hook tail that's in there. So when I give her a bath, I can feel it. And when she used to be a bit skinnier, she had a little bit more of a visible tail. So I just wanted to make that very clear that I don't want anybody thinking that I'm an advocate of tail chopping off, which is mutilation and cruel, just to serve some human aesthetic, which is absolutely disgusting. But I am cognizant of that when I'm walking her. She doesn't really walk anymore because of her disabilities, but I'm always worried that people will think that I've done that to her, and I would never, ever, ever do something so horrible. But yeah, some people will actually have their ears cut so that the ears will have a certain design or whatever. That is, yeah. So I've seen that in the witchcraft community, and it's absolutely gross. But it's not even just the fact that people mutilate their animals to fit an aesthetic. It's that they purebred them in the first place to fit an aesthetic. So I'm here to let you know that there's a whole world of little dogs like Mishka who are just born this way. Just born so adorable and sweet and sleepy. So I wanted to discuss today then the vegan witch sort of theology, if you will, behind the problems of purpose breeding and purchasing people to fit your aesthetic. So my background is this. I'm a vegan animal rights scholar. This is what I teach. This is what most of my publications are in. And I just came into witchcraft as an eco-feminist. I saw a lot of interesting parallels. And so I wrote the book, Vegan Witchcraft, and I started to really explore not just the parallels, but also some of the missed connections, if you will. And this is one of them. And that being that in the witchcraft sort of doctrine, if you will, there's this a deep love and appreciation for non-human animals, because the idea is that traditionally, modern society, the norms of modern society and religious, patriarchal religious norms have all sort of encouraged us to move away from our own animality and also to distance ourselves from fellow species. And this is all part of this great civilization project where humans are being sort of elevated as other than and above everyone else. And just basically the creation of an androcentric, anthropocentric type of society where women don't fare so well and animals don't fare so well and nature doesn't fare so well. And witchcraft has, as a contemporary practice, actively pushed back on that and said, actually, we are animals. We love our animals and they are our kith and kin. And nature is a major part of our well-being and our birthright as well. I love that. That's great. And it very much so aligns with ecofeminist principles. In fact, a lot of witches are ecofeminists and ecofeminists would become witches. There's a lot of overlap there. But unfortunately, that has sort of stopped short of seriously interrogating our actual relationships with non-human animals. So it's one thing to have, an oracle deck of owls or, have a wolf totem, whatever, and then have your familiar be a cat that you live with. Like, fine. Like, these are superficial ways that we can start to pay more attention to animals and show our respect and solidarity. But when it actually comes to the walking your walk, most witches stumble big time. But also, I think it's very important to critique our more personal relationships with living non-human animals. We all have very personal relationships with animals if we're eating them and wearing them. But I'm talking about the animals that are living that we share our homes with. That actually can be a very important sort of petri dish, if you will, of how we might reconsider and experiment with living with animals in a more respectful way. And so the first way that we can do that is to adopt. Because we live in a society where there is rampant discrimination against non-human animals, which is extremely lethal, even for dogs and cats that are supposedly, more loved. Millions and millions and millions of dogs and cats are killed in horrific ways. We like to think that they magically get put to sleep in some magical sleep machine. That is not what happens. Very few places can actually afford lethal injections. And so a lot of times animals are being gassed to death. And they won't go into details further than that, but it's gruesome and it's horrible and it's unnecessary. There's a whole politic about adoption where, with regards to with euthanasia, et cetera, which I won't get into in this video because what I'm really focusing on is the people who are choosing not to adopt when they could. And when you're choosing not to adopt, you're saying that I'm perfectly fine with the fact that the dog that could have lived with me, I'm just going to stick with the dog example since Mishka is here. But when you choose to buy instead of adopt, you're saying, I'm perfectly fine knowing that I have the resources and the space to bring in another person. I'm perfectly fine with that person being gassed to death because I want one that looks like what I see on Instagram or matches my sofa, or this is what all the other witches have, or whatever other capitalist consumerist nonsense that has inspired you to purchase a person rather than offer refuge to someone who's waiting literally on death row for you to bring them in. That to me is absolutely against everything that witchcraft stands for. We're supposed to be embracing our relationship with fellow animals and with nature, not putting a sort of commodity price on things, not adding some superficial aesthetic that will change here today, gone tomorrow. This is capitalism infiltrating into the practice. And we are way more interested in satisfying our own personal desires than we are actually extending assistance and offering solidarity to nature and fellow animals. That's not witchcraft. That's someone who wants to play the part of a witch and wants to look like a witch, but actually is not acting the witch way. Sorry, that's not. If you think it's okay to purchase people, that's not witchcraft. That's consumerism. I think this is something that a lot of people don't think about, but where do these dogs come from? So there's also the issue of puppy mills, which may not be legal in this country where I'm recording in the UK, but that just means that they go elsewhere. So Ireland, for instance, is a big hotspot for puppy mills. And if you don't know what a puppy mill is, Google it. They're horrific. But even if you're quote unquote buying from a responsible breeder, what are you supporting in that case? Basically, you're not just saying that I'm objectifying this being that I want to purchase because it fits my aesthetic. I think it's cute, whatever. But you're also saying that you're approving by proxy the objectification of the mother of that dog that will be repeatedly made pregnant in order to keep making money off of her babies. And so that really does get at the bottom of where does witchcraft stand on bodily autonomy and reproductive justice? And I will leave that for you to decide. But I think it's not just this idea that we think that the puppies themselves are commodities that can be consumed, but we also seem not to really care too much about the well-being of the mother dog who's being basically pimped out and repeatedly made pregnant in order to produce more and more commodities, basically. Even if that's so-called under a respectable, responsible breeder, or whatever it may be, the result is nonetheless the same. That dog is still being treated like a machine that produces profit. And that dog, a female dog, their body and their reproduction is not being respected. It's been treated as something that can be it's being treated as something that creates profit. And that to me also does not seem congruent with what witchcraft is all about, which is about bodily autonomy and respect for your own personhood and respect for feminized bodies everywhere. Yeah, nature's not for sale. People aren't for sale. Women aren't for sale. Bodies should not be for sale. That's my 2 cents on it. I think it's extremely against what we believe in as witches as far as offering solidarity and respecting other persons as persons. And I think one of the best ways that we can actually embrace witchcraft in a practical way is to offer refuge and home to another person who is non-human. Not everybody has the ability to do that. I perfectly understand that. Like I rent myself, and it's very difficult to do. This is the only place I could find that allowed me to have cats, actually. I understand that, but there's other ways that we can support. You can actually volunteer with some of these charities that are trying to get animals adopted. Some people find that it's more realistic to foster animals if they can't commit to the long term. Keeping non-human animals safe and healthy is also very expensive. Not everyone can afford that. So that was a big thing that happened after COVID, when there was a big rush for everybody to adopt a dog or to buy a dog, unfortunately. And then after COVID was sort of on the way out, or at least calmed down and part of the normal life, then there was a mad rush to dump all these animals that nobody wanted anymore. Or then, of course, the recession that happened after COVID, then people couldn't afford to keep animals anymore. I've averaged it out, just if you're curious, if you're thinking about adopting, I've averaged it out. I'm very good on my budget and itemizing everything I spend my money on. I have 3 animals. I have a dog and 2 cats, and they average about, over the year, about 100 pounds each per month. So that's not something to sniff at. So I'm talking about, that includes good healthy food, that includes vet examinations, that includes all the little bits and bobs I need to get them. So it is an investment. The last bit I'd like to discuss on this topic is coming back to this idea of the familiar. And I have a whole chapter on this in my book on familiars and witchcraft. And I think it's a really interesting point of connection, where the whole point of familiars, and that's quite unique to British witchcraft history, where non-human animals were seen as accomplices with witches. And so if women were, especially women, not always women, but if women were seen to be living with other animals a little too intimately, or caring for them, or God forbid, suckling them, which some people did. If you were making milk, why not share to animals who might be in need? Any of that kind of stuff, like, you would immediately be branded a witch and you'd be in serious trouble, because basically what you're doing is you're challenging the project of humanity that is under construction that I mentioned earlier. This idea of humans being above and different from other animals, that's actually quite historically new, at least here in the West. Other cultures in other parts of the world, of course, have more have not abandoned that. I think in Hinduism is a good example of that. But at least here in the British Isles, that was part of the big construction of humanity. And so the church was very much so interested in managing how we lived with other animals, how we lived with each other, et cetera, et cetera. And so one of the things that witchcraft has done more recently then is to say that actually living with other animals, having a powerful bond with other animals is not something to be ashamed of. And it's definitely not something that's evil. This is something that is very inherent to the human condition. We thrive living with other animals. We are a social species. And many species, by the way, not just humans, but many species actually rely on other species around them in the community in order to have the best quality of life. And you actually can see this in, you can see this if you watch wildlife documentaries, but you can also see this if you look at farm sanctuaries where animals are not rigidly segregated from one another, and they form really interesting friendships and family units across the species barrier. So this is a natural, normal thing for social species to do. And so witches are starting to re-embrace that and say that actually this is something that brings a lot of good quality to our lives and to their lives. So I think then when we're looking at familiar magic, when we are adopting other animals and bringing it into our homes, if we can do so, if we have the wherewithal to sustain that, if we have the means to sustain that in any way, I think that can be a very potent way of really living witchcraft in the everyday. But when you're purchasing someone, when you go online or wherever and you're saying, I think I want, I know what's cute, a wiener dog that we know will have disabilities and genetic issues, or I think I want to get a Great Dane, which you know will have genetic issues and disabilities and also won't live very long. When you're out choosing as though you're picking out your new outfit for the next season or whatever, like, this is absolutely not familiar magic. This is capitalism infiltrated into your witchcraft. So purchasing other beings is not the way to do familiar magic. You can't buy your way into a relationship like that. Can people have very meaningful, powerful bonds with the animals that they buy? Sure. But I'm really concerned about that because then the underlying bit of that is you still think that person is a commodity because you picked them out like a commodity and you purchased them like a commodity, knowing full well that someone else over there is going to hit the death chamber because you wanted to have this cute little spotted dog or this cute designer dog of some kind. I can't imagine that would be good familiar magic if it was premised on that sort of depersonalization, that objectification of another person. Even if you do really truly love that person, at the end of the day, you bought them. So I will leave it at that and that's something to think about, I suppose. And, I'll probably have more videos in the future about familiars and how we can negotiate that, because it's a very interesting parallel between animal rights and vegan feminism and witchcraft theology. But for now, please consider adopting. If you can't adopt, then please consider volunteering. And obviously you can always donate, but I think volunteering is probably it's more of a personal relationship that you can build up versus just throwing money at something. Because as you've gotten from this video, I don't think you can just throw money at something to make the magic happen. Capitalism is a major part of why we have become alienated from ourselves, other animals, and nature. And embracing capitalism in order to fit some witchcraft aesthetic is absolutely counterintuitive. All right, so please keep it witchy, please keep it vegan, consider adopting. And don't forget to subscribe. I have lots of other how-to videos, but also lots of theoretical videos. And sometimes these videos where I just get a bit cantankerous. Say bye-bye, Mishka. Oh, bye-bye. Sleepy puppy.